Hello everyone, welcome back to Grace Church for another episode of Hymns of Grace, or Hymns from Grace, I should say. So happy to have you with us. I will mention again at the end of our session today, I'll remind you that on Thursday we are in person for our Thursday noon concerts. We had our first one this past Thursday. That went very well, and we will be happy to welcome you, and I'll remind you at the end about how to register for that if you want to join us. But first of all, today is Tuesday, so we're going to take you through a few hymns today, 3 great hymns of the church today. So very happy, these are some of my favorites, so I'm happy to share them with you. Please keep the requests coming in. I still have enough requests for several more weeks, but happy to hear from you if you would like to have a hymn featured. That would be great. So we're going to begin today with one of my all-time favorites, hymn 518, Westminster Abbey, or Christ Has Made the Sure Foundation. This was requested by our good friend Brian Ehlers. So thanks, Brian, for this great hymn. This text first entered the hymnal in 1871, but it gained even greater popularity once it was paired with the tune Westminster Abbey, the way we know it today, in the hymnal supplement in 1976. It was quite late here that we paired those together. The text and the tune relationship was first introduced to Americans through the broadcast of the wedding of Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon in 1960. So these British wedding broadcasts certainly influenced musical taste. After Diana, slight derail here, after Charles and Diana were married in 1981, everybody wanted the trumpet voluntary. And many brides threw over "Here Comes the Bride" for trumpet voluntary because they'd heard it on television. So this text and tune of Christ Has Made the Sure Foundation and Westminster Abbey came to us in 1960 via television waves and made it even more popular. The text is one of the oldest Latin hymns found in manuscripts that date back to the 9th century and possibly even to the 6th century. So it's hard to even comprehend something being that old. It's part of a much longer hymn associated with the dedication of a church, and that's certainly how we use the hymn today frequently for a church dedication or festival days, something to do with our physical building. If we have an add-on to the building, or if we renovate the church itself, or the nave or the sanctuary or something, often this hymn would come into use. But the 4 stanzas of hymn 518 that we know today, they are the 4th, 5th, let me get this right. They are the latter 4 hymns, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the original Latin. The first 4 stanzas of the original Latin are used for hymn 519 and 520 in our hymnal. But Christ Has Made the Sure Foundation came from stanzas 5 through 8, the second 4 stanzas of the original Latin hymn. The tune, Westminster Abbey, is derived from an anthem by the great English composer Henry Purcell. I know some people say Purcell. My good friend Barry Rose says Purcell. He's way more English than I am, so I go with that. The tune was likely given its name by Sir Sidney Nicholson, who was organist of Westminster Abbey from 1919 to 1928. So the tune as we know it was arranged from the Alleluia section of Purcell's anthem, "O God, Thou Art My God." Funny thing about that, "O God, Thou Art My God," that text is appropriate in Lent, the text itself, and I've several times scheduled it for Lent, and then remember that the anthem concludes with a whole section of Alleluias, which to the Westminster Abbey tune. So you can't do that during Lent. So I figured out a way to end the "O God, Thou Art My God" anthem and not have the Alleluias. But that section of the anthem is where we get the hymn, the tune that we know today. There's a descant that's quite wonderful, that's in the hymnal, and that was written in 1982 by James Gillespie for the boys in his choir at the school where he was the director of music, and so he wrote that descant for them, and then it got into our hymnal 1982. It's a grand hymn. It's in 3 beats per bar. Christ is made the sure fountain. It's like so forth. But it's still quite grand. Sometimes hymns in 3 can be sort of waltzy or sing-songy, but this one is really quite wonderful, and again used for great occasions. Nothing sort of says strong beginning to an Episcopal service like having this hymn at the beginning. So I will play a couple of stanzas of this wonderful hymn for you. This is Westminster Abbey, and with music from originally from Purcell, Purcell, and a text based on a very, very old Latin text. As always, I'll give you a little introduction. Like if we were starting a big service here at Grace, how I might play for a bit to get the choir into the space before we actually go into the hymn. Such a great hymn. The descant, I promise I won't sing it for you, but sometimes descants have pieces or parts to them that have just become quite iconic, and I think that's the case with this one. It does two things that I like a lot. One is that it begins the descant just like the melody, so you don't know it's coming, it's a surprise. So the melody begins, as does the descant, and it's not until the third measure, after the first beat, that you realize there's a descant, like so. Here. So I think that's wonderful. And then some scales at the end of the descant that are quite nice. Mr. Gillespie, being a tasteful Englishman, lets the descant end on the third. I must confess that sometimes here at Grace Church, we forget that that's what's written, and we end the descant like this. So, anyway, it's a wonderful descant and a wonderful, wonderful hymn, so thank you, Brian. So the next hymn we're going to do today is hymn 653. The tune name is Repton, and the text is Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. This was requested by our good friends Dave Seifert and Levon Seifert, so we're happy to do this hymn for them. This hymn has really just some fascinating information, particularly about the text, but we'll talk about this. So there are two tunes in our hymnal. I've mentioned to you that a number of texts in our hymnal appear with two tunes, often because it would be that one was widely accepted in use, maybe in America, and maybe there was a different tune associated with the text in another part of the world, and so the hymnal editors wanted to bring that one in, but they knew that they'd get in lots of trouble if they let the other one go. So I just want to quickly, we're going to focus on 653 in the tune Repton, but this is 652, same text, with the tune Rest, called Rest by Frederick Charles Maker. artsy, very, I can't think of all the words I want to use. Not that it's bad. Sentimental, very sentimental. And I remember, this is the tune I grew up with. I certainly didn't know Repton. And I remember at the end, on this lowered sixth, I used to cringe a little bit as a kid. I don't know why, because I didn't really know anything about it. Anyway, we talk about that tune another day. Today we're talking about Repton. The matching of the text that we're talking about, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind, with the tune Repton first occurred at the Repton School in Derbyshire in England, probably some years before it was ever in print. You know, that somebody combined them and they did it at the school. It was just something they did there and nobody really knew about it. The text is taken from John Greenleaf Whittier's 17-stanza poem, The Brewing of Soma, which was first published in the Atlantic Monthly in 1872. As much as we all love the hymn, probably grateful that they didn't get all 17 stanzas in there. So this poem, this is the fascinating bit. The poem describes East Indian priests brewing a drink of the gods and its intoxicating effects on worshipers. So that means everything, what does that mean? Whittier was a Quaker, and he was opposed to form and ceremony and emotional excess in religion. So I didn't want to put in my notes, type all this out. So I brought my handy hymnal companion here with a nice bookmark from Christ Church in New Haven. Thank you, Christ Church, for that. I just want to read you a little bit here. So Whittier recalls in his poem how, and these are some stanzas that we don't sing, age after age has striven by music, incense, vigils drear, and trance to bring the skies more near or lift man up to heaven. In other words, we use incense and music and ceremony and well, he says trance, you could say prayer, I suppose, whatever, to get us closer to heaven, right? And yet the past comes round again, and new doth old fulfill. In sensual transports wild as vain, we brew in many a Christian lane the heathen soma still. So he's referring to this brew, this soma, and he's saying we still sort of do that in lots of different ways. We're not actually brewing it. We do things in our ceremony and our rites in church that sort of have the same kind of effect. So we weren't really for that at all. So overall, the poem was saying this is not good, not good. He concludes the poem with a 6-stanza prayer for Christians, and that's basically the hymn we know today, minus stanza 15. And recent hymnologists have questioned the appropriateness of Whittier's stanza for Christian worship. In other words, what he included as a prayer for Christian worshipers at the end of this poem, sort of, not approving of what many Christians do in worship. Some people have said, some hymnologists have said, maybe that's not necessarily a great hymn for worship. The hymnologist Eric Routley said, and I'm going to read again so I didn't have to type it all out. He said, if there is a case against dear Lord and Father, perhaps it is that there Whittier was writing a polemical piece, a poetic tract contrasting the serenity and sanity of the Christian faith with the vaporings of a kind of drug addictive transcendental meditation associated with the drinking of soma, a potion designed to induce visions. The quietism of the hymn as we know it takes on a very different tone when its context is made explicit. So yes, that's very true. But what I would say is if worshipers don't know that history, of course now all of you do, but mostly when you're sitting in church on a Sunday singing this hymn, we don't know that. It's unlikely that anybody is going to be thinking about a drug addictive transcendental meditation. It's really just a very beautiful text, very calming, restful text. The tune, as I mentioned, was associated with one of England's oldest boarding schools, Repton. And the original source of the tune is from the oratorio Judith, composed by C.H.H. Parry. And you may remember Parry from our session last week. He wrote the wonderful hymn. So this melody, Repton, that you're about to hear, came from his oratorio Judith, with completely different words, of course. But that's where the melody that we know now as Repton came from. There's a whole long history in here about the probability of how those things happened and came together, and whether Parry knew about it or not, all of that. I'll let you Google and look all that up. But what we know is that the beautiful, beautiful tune, and it is beautiful, is by Parry. So just a couple things. I'm going to play you a couple stanzas of the hymn. But the fifth stanza of the hymn, and Dave Seifert specifically mentioned this, and it is a favorite, I think, sort of everybody that loved this hymn. The last stanza, it says, "Breathe through the heats of our desire thy coolness and thy balm." In other words, calm us down, God. "Let sense be dumb, let flesh retire." Let us completely relax. So you can see, if you're thinking about the whole brewing of Soma bit, you could think, well, what's going on here? But let's leave that out of it for now. "Let sense be dumb, let flesh retire. Speak through the earthquake, wind, and fire, O still small voice of calm." And certainly through the ages, and certainly today, we are living through earthquake, wind, and fire in every kind of way. And we all long for a sense of calm, whether it comes from a still small voice or a bigger voice, it doesn't really matter. So I think it just shows how these old texts just become new again all the time for us. So I'm going to play two stanzas. The second one that I play is going to be that stanza 5. And I will confess to you, I haven't spent a lot of time doing this, but I'm going to try to do what really good organists do, is that the organ crescendos as you get to let sense be dumb, let flesh retire, speak through the earthquake, wind and fire, oh still small voice of calm, and then the organ decrescendos again. I might fall off the bench trying to do that, but I'm going to try to paint that text in the second stanza that I play, which is the fifth stanza of the hymn. I'll give you two. So thank you, Dave, for requesting this. Just a beautiful, beautiful melody and a most interesting text. Wasn't too smooth, but you get the idea, I hope. And it's a great way to paint the text there. And if you have everybody singing, if you have a big choir singing, have them do the big crescendo with you and then the crescendo. So again, thank you for that, Dave, and we'll hope that we leave everybody with a still small voice of calm. So to conclude today, yet another of my favorite hymns. This one was requested by our good friend Jim Mahoney. Jim, thank you for this. This is hymn 680 in our hymnal, known as "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," to the tune Saint Anne. Probably, I'm guessing at home, some people are going, "Oh, I love that, I love O God." Very, very popular. This text is probably Isaac Watts' best known and probably his finest text. It's a masterful paraphrase of Psalm 90, stanzas 1 to 5, and can be found in practically every English language hymnal in the world. And that's a pretty powerful thing, because we've talked about hymns that are in our Episcopal hymnals, many that came from England, but many from America. But when you get into the Methodist hymnal or the Presbyterian hymnal, certainly there's some overlap. As you go into the more evangelical traditions, there's less overlap. But this hymn is, I grew up with it in every hymnal that I knew in the rural South in Tennessee. And it's just really universal in almost every way. So that's a big thing, as you might know now from our talking about hymns and how they appear in different collections in different denominations in different parts of the world. This was first published by Watts, the text, in his Psalms of David in London, 1719, and it was entitled "Man, Frail and God Eternal." Originally, it contained nine stanzas, but commonly 4, 6, and 8 are omitted. That's a common thing to leave us with the 5 stanzas that we know. John Wesley altered the opening from "Our God, our help" to "O God, our help." Not totally sure why, but it certainly is an easier thing to sing, "O God," instead of "Our God, our help." That's a little tricky. So that's, and the text, I was going to say later on, I'll say now, this often is used at funerals, certainly used for Sunday church, used for college and school events where it's allowed. I mean, growing up, this was always the hymn at public school. It wasn't a religious school, but we had a baccalaureate ceremony before graduation which was more of a religious ceremony. This was always the hymn. "O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home." There's just not much to argue with there, honestly, sort of no matter what your belief system is. And also a little bit of similarity with that last verse we just talked about in "Dear Lord and Father," sheltering us from the storm and the earthquake and the wind and the fire. The authorship of the tune has long been disputed. St. Anne is the tune name, A-N-N-E. It's quite likely, and now pretty widely accepted, that it was composed by William Croft, who was organist of the Chapel Royal and of Westminster Abbey, and the leading composer of Queen Anne's reign. Croft was organist at St. Anne's Church in Soho in London from 1700 to 1711, so that is likely the connection for the tune name, and of course the reign of Queen Anne as well. St. Anne the tune has enjoyed phenomenal and unbroken popularity since it was first introduced. It was printed in Ireland in 1749, Scotland in 1750, Holland in 1753, America in 1761, Canada in 1816, and India in 1818. The text, that's the tune. The text and the tune were first joined in 1814, and I have a new favorite name. So they were first joined in 1814 in Theophania Cecil's collection, and this is the name of her collection: "The Psalm and Hymn Tunes Used at St. John's Chapel, Bedford Row, London." That's quite a name of a collection. I'll say it again: "The Psalm and Hymn Tunes Used at St. John's Chapel, Bedford Row, London." That was compiled by Theophania Cecil. And it was likely that the text and tune were matched by her father, Richard Cecil, who was an English clergyman, an evangelical clergyman, and also an amateur composer. As I said, the tune has been used so many times for so many occasions and ceremonies because its appropriateness is so broad. There are two sort of interesting things about it. The tune is likely created, if Croft indeed did write it, he actually probably took fragments of tunes that already existed and put this together. It's sometimes called a sawtooth tune because it goes up and down. We've talked about hymns that have stepwise, and then this hymn is built on skips. So I guess the idea of sawing back and forth, it feels like it just goes back and forth. But it's likely that some of those phrases or some of those bits of the tune were fragments of other phrases that were about in those days. So the two comparisons that get made to this tune, or sort of almost attributions, this would have been written first. In the 17-teens, Handel wrote one of his Chandos anthems, is called "O Praise the Lord with One Consent," and the big main chorus goes like this. Same thing, just in a different key. And then later on, in the late 1730s, Bach wrote his very famous E-flat Prelude and Fugue to frame the Klavierboom, his collection, big collection. And the St. Anne Fugue, it's called because, Bach probably didn't call it that, but it begins like this. So it's not clear who knew what about what. The little bit of research I've done indicates that Handel may not have known Croft's tune. He may have known Croft's tune, but he may not have. He may have just known some of the same fragments, particularly that opening fragment that Croft had heard somewhere when he created this tune. It's possible that Bach might have heard Handel's Chandos anthem. and use the opening tune. Anyway, that opening of Bach's fugue is affectionately called St. Anne. It's a 3-part fugue, and it's really the opening where you hear it most. So I'm going to play one stanza of this hymn for you, and then I'd like to end today with a snippet of Bach's fugue, which is, we don't say it's on this tune, but it is this tune, so to speak. So this is "O God, Our Help in Ages Past." And again, thank you to Jim Mahoney for the request for this hymn. It's just a wonderful tune, wonderful text. I just wanted to share one other stanza with you. Stanza 5, again, these things get made new over and over and over and become relevant over and over. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all our years away. They fly forgotten as a dream dies at the opening day. So much truth in that. So just to close our session today, and while I'm switching books here, I'll remind you that on Thursday you can join us in person. Our wonderful Associate Director of Music, David Hines, will be playing an organ concert on Thursday at noon live here. You simply need to email me in advance, preferably by Wednesday, so that'll be tomorrow night by 6 p.m., to my email, vedwards@gracepvd.org, to say that you want to come and how many are in your party and your phone number, and we'll register you. And if you don't remember any of that, just go to our Grace website, go to Music at Grace, and Thursday noon concerts, and you will see the prompt there to email me. So I hope to see some of you on Thursday. So to close our session, this is my very old broken down Bach, one of my collections of Bach. So there's the prelude in E flat. We're not going to talk about that today though. But here's the fugue that I was referencing for you. Okay. So this is Bach's E flat fugue, which sounds very much like St. Anne. Pedal. And then there's a very bright little crispy middle section, and then it goes to the last section of the fugue, which is very dramatic, and ends, interestingly, not quite with the tune as we know it, but almost. So the tune as we know it in the pedal would be, let's see. In Bach's last entrance, instead of coming in on the dominant, it comes in on the subdominant. And I think many organists are very nervous about that entrance because in your head you want it to be, in this case it's B flat would be the key, you want it to be B flat because that would be the melody, the way the melody would begin for this tune, but it's one note off from that. But still you can hear it. And I think the reason this fugue is so popular, and it is, even with people who don't know organ music terribly well, because they have the association with this incredibly famous and well-loved hymn. So I'm just going to leave you with the last phrase of Bach's E-flat fugue, and you'll hear the melody, but off by one note. I haven't really registered this, so don't listen to that, just listen for the note.